just want to speak and touch on this topic here about gang and violence. My name is Devon Timms. I'm 24 years old. I'm a young male that lived in just about every one of these communities in Chicago, rather, should I say. I just want to speak and say that they're absolutely right on the subject they're touching, that it's not gang related, because there are no such thing as gangs in our streets no more. What we have is groups of savages now, just out, ready to take and go for it and conquer anything that has no meaning, which is a subject to our violence. Our violence is what we are doing. Our people are subliminally, it's called subliminal ignorance, is what I like to call it, because what they call themselves is standing up and fighting and defending themselves for something that has no meaning, that they think have meaning. And what they're doing is mislead. They have been misled by our media of music, our media of an in-house take, the people that they see in-house, the people that they came under, the things they see on TV from the things they see in the street has misled our people and subliminalized them, which means that they have been blind and misled to believe that it's something that it isn't. And that's what they're fighting for and trying to conquer. And basically they reaching for something that's not there, and it's self-annihilation, it's self-destruction, and that's why our community and our youth is coming to a form of self-destruction, which is also a word that can be used for. It's called genocide. We're in the process of genocide. A huge major effect of genocide is in process right now. The thing is, our people are numb to society, numb to what's going on to society. And when I say our people, I mean the people who are not teaching the people are numb to it. And the reason that is because if they were, they would be more enforced and more intact on the situation. They would be forcing this more than they would be forcing their kids to go to school and be false fabricated about the things that's taught there. Because what we don't know is what we should be afraid of, what we don't know. And some of our people just don't care what they don't know. They can only go for what they do know. And it's really nothing. Okay. All right. That's all.
All right. I want to... Actually, I want to stay on this gang aspect for a minute, but I want to come at it from a different angle. You all may be aware of the fact that just recently, one of our U.S. senators have said that he would propose targeting a specific street gang in this city. I think it was the Black Gangster Disciples that he wanted to target. And it was his feeling that by targeting that street gang, that a lot of the crime in the black community would be eliminated. Now, it seems like that's the same kind of approach that Bloomberg wanted to take in New York City with Stop and Frisk. Let's target black and Latinos. And they just came out with the report that it was more white New Yorkers that were carrying weapons and contraband than it was black and Latinos. Now, all of this kind of leads to this hyper-incarceration that we've experienced. So, you know, the question for the panel is this kind of approach really helping to mitigate violence, or is it contributing to it? This targeting of our neighborhood. I mean, we are here because we realize the kind of violence that's going on in our community. So we are very conscious and aware of it. But when the external community, when they try to address this problem, are they approaching it in the right way? And if they're not, then how should they be approaching it? Okay? Anybody want to tackle that?
I just want to say, going back on the basis of what they said, violence itself is to be violated, you know? Something our ancestors and our people have been going through for a long time. We've been violated. So what the thing is now that we've learned how to what I should say, uphold and upjoyce ourselves, we've become the threat with our violence. And what they want to do is annihilate the threat, because anybody, I want to come and touch on when he said, is violence unique in Chicago? I want to get your meaning of your word unique, because what's unique to me is when they can control us in the way of killing ourselves. That's unique alone, you know, which actually should be ununique in our eyes. It's not just Chicago. It's a nation. It's a whole. It's the world. You know, like he say, violence is in the Caucasian communities, but it would never be televised or mediaized as much as our violence is. We want to be made out to be known as the most violent and threatened species to mankind right now, and they would savage our names and put us through the dirt just as much as possible. The only way we can change that. The only way we can change that is if we humble ourselves and humble our people. That's the only way I figure it can be changed. And the only way that's going to work is with unity, a strong unity. And like he said, there's no one solution. We have to unite all of those solutions that he spoke on earlier.
Does any one of the panelists want to talk about the external approach to addressing violence in our community?
Well, just going back to what you originally mentioned about the approach of saying, okay, we're going to target the Black Disciple street gang in Chicago, and then that's going to take down some of the violence. I want to touch upon two things, two members of the panel, two concepts. What Mr. Myers talked about with violence is more than just how many are dead and wounded, and also what the young man just said, violence is being violated. Ultimately, that approach, you know, as an attorney, as someone who believes in the Constitution and protecting our constitutional rights, you know, I think that's just it's a setup to fail. Ultimately, emotionally, it sounds good to say, "Hey, we're going to target this group. We're going to get rid of violence in the community." But effectively, what it's saying is, what we're going to do is we're going to come in and we're going to violate 100 people in order to catch the one bad person. Because when you say we're going to target the Black Disciples gangs, well, how do you know who is and who is not a disciple? Because last I heard, people don't necessarily walk around with membership rolls and membership cards where you know this person definitely is as opposed to this person definitely is not. And so if you're giving the police force to say, or even if it's Chicago police or if it's the FBI, ATF, or whomever, and you're saying, hey, let's go and target these disciples, and let's go, you know, are you going to just go indict them? Are you going to lock them up? Are you going to prosecute them? Or are you going to harass them? And if it's an issue of harassment, that means that every black male from the age of probably 12, if he's a big 12, to the age of probably 50 or 60, because we know black don't crack, and we look a lot younger than what we are, so that means that they're going to be targets. And so that goes into the violence that doesn't fall into the column of this person is dead or wounded, and it goes into being violated. So you have a community now that's being violated, that's supposed to be served, but instead is being violated. And that leads to distrust for law enforcement, which in the long run empowers the same people that you're targeting. Because now, I'm old enough to remember rap music going back in the 90s and the late 80s. And I remember there's a rap song by Ice Cube. And he's talking about the police, you know, F the police and stuff, and how you coming in and beating down black folks. But it also talks about drug dealers. It says, hey, you're as bad as the cops because you're killers. So effectively what he's saying in the music, that everybody was so upset about the cussing and stuff, but they weren't listening to the lyrics, what he's saying is the vast majority of black folks were law-abiding people, and we're caught in between. You have the thugs on one side, which is a small number of the community, and then you have what's supposed to be a law enforcement on the other side. If they don't, and I'm not going to denigrate all law enforcement, but if you come in with the standpoint of, I'm just going to do this blanket goose-stepping type scenario where I'm going to target this gang, and I'm going to come in and just harass an entire community without knowing what you're doing. What you're doing is you're persecuting innocent people in a search for guilty folks. And therefore, I think that actually is a form of violence in and of itself, and is a setup for fail. So,
I don't hear nobody talking about targeting the Ku Klux Klans or the Aryan Brotherhood or some of these other terrorist organizations that terrorize and, you know, cause mayhem in this country against our people. So I think Mark Kurt, his name is, I think he needs to have a checkup from the neck up, you know. because it sounds like he got issues. You know, I think that stroke might have affected his brain a little bit too extreme. But and like I say, my whole point is dealing with the mentality of young brothers and sisters. And my hope is that we can come up with a solution where as though we can have some type of control in our community, because you know, I think all these boarded up buildings, these closed down schools, all that tends to, in my opinion, affect the influx of violence in our community. You know, even the schools that they do have closed, they don't have no after school programs. We used to be able to go into schools after school and shoot pool, play ping pong, play basketball, whatever, but none of that is happening no more. So, you know, as opposed to them talking about stopping violence, I think they actually are promoting it and encouraging it, bringing these drugs in our neighborhood, bringing these guns in our neighborhood. They ain't targeting them, you know. I mean, they can go over in Afghanistan and stop stuff over there, you know. So I think this country with the most powerful military ever been known to man has the ability to do a lot of things. They got satellites watching people down here every day, all day, and you gonna tell me they can't solve a murder case? When, you know what I'm saying? But they can go all over the country and the world to look for somebody that, you know, set off a bomb. They can pick them and find them out real easy. But they got all these damn cameras. Excuse my language, I tend to curse sometimes. But they got all these cameras. They cut me off the radio when I do this here, but I can't get cut off now. But they got all these cameras in our community, man. And I'm saying everywhere on the west side where they got cameras at, they selling drugs, you know. If right there, right, you can go, I can go right now, I can take anybody in this room to a drug spot right under the camera, right out of an Arab store. These Arabs, I see now one of them coming out being handcuffs. You know, that facilitates violence. If they got somebody selling drugs out of there, then somebody might sell somebody the wrong drugs or something might happen. They might want to stick the drug dealer up. That contributes to the violence, you know. But if they were so concerned about targeting violence, they would, you know, with all these cameras we got watching us every day, all day, they can solve a whole lot of violence. But I don't think that's what their intent is. I think their intent is simply to wipe us out by any and every means available to them. And they're gonna utilize it if they get opportunity. And I think that in the near future, hell, we're gonna probably be out here in the street fighting, but it's gonna be a different fight. You know, so I'm prepared, I'm ready, you know. I'm ready.
Yes, sir. I wanted he started right into that, but I want to, first of all, when you look at the Constitution, it lets us know that slavery is abolished except as a means of punishment. And then Michelle Alexander, she has a book out right now dealing with the new Jim Crow. And then we see the Correction Corporation of America was making this deal that if you got to keep the prison at a certain capacity, and we will invest in private prisons. And then when you start to look at the drugs and the influx of drugs that's coming to our community, every time we rise, the CIA finally had to say they were complicit coming through California and bringing crack to the community. Then we have to start looking at, right now, as brother mentioned up, the influence from the music. And so when you say the outside, are they really trying to help? Let's just come back to Dr. Lance, and he said, I'm gonna be real brief with this. He said there's a spiritual component that's missing. And then Dr. Myers, Attorney Lou Myers said that, you know, it's very broad. I'm coming from Minister Farrakhan's standpoint. Years ago, he ran around, he did a lecture as he traveled and toured dealing with Stop the Violence. Then he also told us that the war on drugs and gangs is really a war on black people and our youth in particular. Michelle Alexander verifies that with all the information that she puts in the new Jim Crow. And so if we don't understand who we are And we've been up under attack for all the time we've been up under here right now. And the attack is primarily, as it was in the days of Moses, in the days of Jesus, to sit back and kill the male and spare the female, and understand that that attack is still prevalent today, that there's an all-out assault on not just incarcerating us, but even annihilating us, because right now we are coming down to the end of this white man's white supremacy and his rule. And he understands, as is written in Scripture, that he has a short time left. And now he has gone down right now, roaring and lying, and he's devouring anybody that he can. And so his thing right now, attack is all out, in particular, on stopping these young boys and these young brothers from realizing who they are and what their place is in history. And so as I've been around all across this city meeting, brothers are beginning to recognize that these young brothers are our soldiers. They are our military to protect our future that we are now working to build. And so they understand this, who they are. Hoover told us, let us stop the rise of a black messiah. We continue to overlook that there's an all-out attack primarily on young black males. And so we think Kirk lost his mind. No, Kirk just exposed to you the diabolical thinking of a lot of these white men in power. He didn't just say stop at Hoover and the GDs. He said, then I'm going to go after the rest of them. He said, we estimate to be over 100,000 gang members in Chicago. We're going to start with the GDs, but our aim is to go after all of them. So it's no coincidence that they took down all of our leadership, and they have a lot of them that's scared to accept leadership today because they're afraid of being caught up under RICO statutes and other laws that's on the book. So some people are actually running scared as opposed to standing up and saying, hell, I've already been in jail already. What more can you do to me? But so no, brother, the outside influence with the guns coming in. I saw brothers in my block, and I'm shutting my mouth. They raided the house because one little young fool out there just playing with the gun. He wanted to show off to the little girls. About 15 to 16, he let it go in the air. La, la. Now, some of the brothers who were wise was telling the young brothers, we see these vans parked in the neighborhood, but this man ain't really doing no work. The neighborhood is under some high surveillance. So they understand that now that you got guys walking around there that you can see, if you understand, you're looking at, they are military men, and they are setting up for this plan right now to occupy our neighborhood. So some of the older brothers who know the game say, man, these guys walking through the neighborhood is not just a new white man moving in or a new Latino. This man is really working on behalf of the feds, DA, or somebody else, and his look just don't fit into this neighborhood. But the young shorties don't listen because they're on that lean. They don't listen because they're on that dirty Sprite. They don't listen because they're on that Molly. So they're not paying attention. So the young boy trying to impress the girl, he lie. Police immediately, within seconds, come down on him. Come out the house, 16-year-old got an AK-47. Now, where are these young guys getting 100 clips, 30 clip guns? And you mentioned the Arabs. They busted several Arabs, and they shut down the ones on the southeast side on 79th Street not too long ago. But the Arabs have always been, a lot of them involved in the drug dealing, switching cars back and forth. And the boys come in and drop one car, pick the drugs in and shifting it back and forth. They're the ones that bringing the guns in. So the outside influence has never been, on the most part, to help us come to a better people. So no, they ain't trying to help us, man. They trying to continue to mislabel us and falsify the information so they can have a chance to totally annihilate us. So.
Before we go to the audience, I just want to have the panelists, each one of them, talk about what we have to do to reverse this trend. So since you got the mic,
No, you know, let me just, I mean, I appreciate what everybody has said because it's all right. You know, the beautiful thing about a forum like this, and I always tell Lance, my class, there are no wrong answers. Even the wrong answer is right. You know, because we are at least showing a sense that we have to work together. And we put our egos aside. Let me tell you what I think is the infrastructural piece. It is not the responsibility of the Chicago Police Department to solve the problem of violence in our community. If you are crazy enough to think that dialing 911 is going to make this problem go away. 911 has a function. But at the end of the day, the reason why you dial 911, Brother Minister Caleb, is because we ain't taking care of the business we ought to be. 911 is a call to an outside force to come give you some help. Let me say that again. If anybody in here has ever dialed 911, you're calling somebody from outside of your neighborhood to come help you. That's what 911 is. They got a lady answering the phone. They got people answering the phone. When you call, you say, ah, they robbing me, they killing me. But 911 is a problem you're calling somebody after the fact. Because, Minister Caleb, if your community was organized, you wouldn't be calling 911. You'd be in front of your house or on your block. You'd be solving that crime problem because the people committing the crime and the people who are doing these things in our neighborhoods would know that they have to submit themselves to the discipline of us. It's a crime problem because we ain't solving the problem. The key word here is we. Irishman or Italian from New York cannot come to Chicago, all right, and solve the crime problem. Can't solve the gang problem. Only we can do that. And at the end of the day, we have to come together in forums like this, and we have to develop organizations. We have to develop reference points where we begin to talk about what are the multi-dimensional solutions that we have to organize to solve the systemic problems that are causing death and mayhem and all of this in our communities. And so we have to work together. And we have to use the best. We have to use the Du Bois model. We got to use the talented 10th. We have to use the academics, but we have to use the street folk. Everybody in this has a role. I learn more from talking to people in the community than I can learn from reading 15 books or 20 philosophers. I mean, but we all have to come together and put our brains together, put together our spirit, and begin to develop models that addresses systemically the things that face us. We can't, Rahm Emanuel can't help us on that. Can't. You have to do for self. In that regard, Elijah Muhammad was right. At the end of the day, you start with doing for your what? Self. And when you dial 911, you ain't doing for what? Self. You calling for help. There's a difference than doing for self and calling for what? Help. So we need another number. Maybe our number last is going to be 111. Call the brother and tell him to come over here and deal with the home team. Okay.
Actually, before we get to conference, I've just been put on notice that we got less than a half hour. So you can kind of shorten your remarks so we can get some audience comments in too. Okay?
Okay. I'll try to make it really brief. Let me say this real quick as a solution, but to contextualize it. Think about this. In America, you have less than 10% of the population controls close to 90% of the wealth. A little bit about 85% of it, less than 10% of the population. I mean, think about that. That's about 400 families. And the 400 families in the United States, we got what, 316 million people in America. You're talking about 400 families that have more wealth than 150 million people in the United States of America. So that's extreme, what you might call extreme marginalization or extreme disparity, wealth disparity. So you got the extreme haves and the extreme have-nots, and the have-nots are fighting over these last few crumbs. And this is what creates a lot of tension, because those last few crumbs, black people tend to be at the back of the line fighting over crumbs. Or not even over the crumbs within the back of the line, but crumbs at the front of the line, right? So, but this is what I want to share with you. So how do the less than 10% of the population continue to maintain their control over that extreme amount of wealth? And this is what I want to suggest to us. When you look at what they do, the primary institution that they use to perpetuate wealth from one generation to the next is one institution, and that institution is called the elite boarding schools. So in other words, what happens is those wealthy families send their children to boarding schools, primarily in the East, where the kids are being socialized among themselves within a peer group that is a power network, right? It's a social, so where we educate our children to be successful individuals, which ain't no such thing as a successful individual, they socialize their children to be a part of a social network, right? A power network, which then produce and control so-called successful individuals. So if we want to break this cycle, all we need to do simply is use the same model that they use to perpetuate our power interests, and that is elite boarding schools for black youth, primarily black males, that you socialize them and give them an intense indoctrination of black empowerment and then let them loose on the world. And they got it from there. So that's the first model that I want to suggest. The second thing, and just to add to Brother Caleb, as he mentioned, he talked about the media, and all of us have talked about the media, and we've talked about this violence. But to show you how it's connected, Brother Caleb talked about the Corrections Corporation of America. Then he talked about the music that's perpetuating this ideology of niggerism, gangsterism, thugism. But check this out. I've been talking about this for many years, and no one has really said anything about it, but it's real, like, just eerily weird and diabolical. Right now, and this has been going on for years, over 10 years now. Right now, there is a connection. We have, in the world, you have 7 what you call multinational media conglomerates that control over 90% of everything that we've been talking about: television, books, radio. All of the whole media is controlled by 7 companies. All right? And that's News Corp, that's Walt Disney, that's AOL, Time Warner, Viacom, Sony, and Bertelsmann, right? So those are the big ones. As it relates to music that's really influencing our youth, it comes out of one of those media conglomerates, which is NBC. I didn't mention as one of the 7 is NBC Universal. It's a Comcast. NBC Comcast is just bought in. Now check this out. Within NBC Universal, which is owned by General Electric. Now picture General Electric sitting right here. General Electric is right in the middle. It owns NBC Universal, right? On this side, it owns NBC Universal, which then owns the Universal Music Group, which is the largest producer of music in the world. And it owns the record label Interscope, owned by Jimmy Iovine, which is the largest producer of rap music. So all of them little rappers, from Lil Wayne to Rick Ross to All Young Money, Nicki Minaj, all of them, Drake, all of them, you talking about 50 Cent, Dr. Dre, Eminem, all of them. You talking about Jay-Z, Kanye, all of them up under Def Jams. And then our newest addition to that, Chief Keef, out of Chicago. All of them are on the Jimmy Iovine plantation. All of them rappers that's producing all of this gangsterism that has changed the culture of the hood into a thug culture is owned by General Electric. But on this side of General Electric, to go to what Brother Caleb said, in the last quarter, General Electric invested bought 85 million shares in the Corrections Corporation of America, the largest private prison company on the face of the planet Earth. Now, when you show that to the youth, it's silence, because they know everybody on the rap side, but what they don't know is what's happening on the other side. So we got to share this information with them, because they don't like being played. If it's one thing we don't like in the hood, and that's being played. So show them the connection. We need to show them that, and then we need to be about the business of creating our own boarding schools. Because I think if we could create these boarding schools and indoctrinate them into black power, liberation, we could be out of this mess in maybe 25 years or less. So that's my contribution.
That's how I met this brother. I mean, I never even met him. I heard him at Malcolm X, breaking down the 50 Cent piece. And so, beautiful. Anyway, one thing that I deal with as I meet around, I just stay right here because when I heard Attorney Myers just say our unity and working together in a collective manner is that they have to stop seeing us, and I'll say from a spiritual standpoint, as you mentioned earlier, as we say religious game banging. When we stop all this religious game banging, as I said to a couple preachers, we were at a forum one time, and when they saw us, they snubbed us. You know, and I won't go into no names, and I won't go how it really went down, but to make a long story short, I was blessed by one of the person's assistant pastors to be invited to a forum that one of the pastors who had snubbed us was sitting right there, and I got a chance to sit right next to him. And I looked at him, and he knew what I was talking about, and I mentioned to him about religious game banging and about the effect that it has on the community, because we have no right to sit back and tell them to come together, them to stop killing each other, because the scripture says life and death is in the power of the tongue. So if we're going to continue to kill each other and talk about the differences that we have and exploit those differences, there's no need of us going out there talking about telling them to put down their differences and set aside their differences. So we have to come up out of that and grow up and understand that we all need each other and understand each other's benefit and utilize that to the best of our ability to save the whole.
My suggestion would be, first thing, if you see some young brothers running around with their pants hanging up, tell them to pull their pants up. I mean, that's an indication of a lack of man leadership in our community, if I ever seen it, you know. But I would suggest that those of us who be around children try to mentor them. And lastly, I just want to say this briefly. If you see a situation, you got relatives in a situation, or you know people that get into a situation, then we're going to leave you a number. You can call us, and we'll come and deal with the situation. You know, if it's got anything to do with violence, confrontation, disagreements, whatever, you can call us, and I can assure you that we will come. So that's it.
Well, we'll make it real brief. We've heard terms in rap, you always hear money, power, respect. You know what? We need to flip that around. We need to respect each other so we get to know each other. We get to know each other just like the brother's talking about, the networks. The biggest lie, well, you know, I'm not going to say the biggest lie because we've learned so many growing up. There's no point in trying to single out one. But one major lie that we've all believed in is this BS about, oh, yeah, the rugged individual. There is not one rugged individual except for us Christians who believe in Jesus Christ, who was the rugged individual who came here and was killed because of what he did for us as an individual. Other than that, the rest of us, there's not one individual that has changed things by themselves. It is done collectively. It is done with the network. We need to build our networks, and how we build our networks is to get to know each other. Now, we was talking about, you know, the brother was talking about how, you know, the elite schools out east and the boarding schools. That is absolutely correct. These people, they get to know each other. You know, go to the library, look at books, look up books, biographies, autobiographies or biographies of these presidents, of these captains of industry, of these people who want to sit up and talk to you about how they pull themselves up by their bootstraps, and they're ignoring that they got their mommy and daddy's initials on it. How it works is if we want to help ourselves as a black community, there are a lot of things. You know, Mr. Myers said it correctly. There's not one thing that's going to do it. We need to, just like any strong foundation of any building, it takes many bricks. You know, so one of the bricks is to build our networks. Let's get to know each other. Let's strengthen our networks so our dollar can turn over in our community, so that we know who to go to. We know who to trust, who we can't trust. But in order to do that, we got to learn to respect each other. In order to do that, we have to control the media and what we believed in, because we have, going back to education, we have been educated to believe that strength is being a gangster when we know all those gangsters are getting locked up. Or sexiness is being a stripper when we know that, hey, that pole only got a couple years and you only make a bunch of dollars and that's it. So that's, go ahead and educate ourselves and change the media that's coming out. That's how we're being played. Get the word out about how we're being played. Because there are tons of wonderful artists out there. Rap is just poetry put to words and music. There are wonderful poets out there with great positive messages, images that we can teach ourselves and our children. that who we are. And I just want to leave just one little aspect. You know, I love sports. I'm a big Bears fan, Bulls fan, White Sox fan. Hell, I even follow the Blackhawks. Okay? And if you look at throughout history, and I'm also a fan of history, if you look throughout history, it wasn't as if baseball was created because it wasn't baseball was created for the black man to play or black people to play. Basketball wasn't created for black people to play. You know, football wasn't created necessarily just for black people to play. But what happened? Once you start seeing African Americans get into that field and succeed, and then the image was, we can do it. Once we were convinced that we were better at it than everybody else, then we dominated. Well, what happens if we convince our young men and our young women that they're the best standardized test takers in the world? What happens if we convince our young men and our young women that they are the hardest workers, that no one will ever outwork them at anything? If it's academics, if it's business, if it's art, if it's anything. What if we convince them of that? 10 years from now, what you will have is you will have an entire different reality that we'll be living in. We won't be talking about this issue of violence in our community. We'll be talking about something else, positive. So that's the image that is what we can do, and it starts by you free your mind, respect, get to know your people. That's where your money comes from. And when you got that respect and that money and that network, you got all the power in the world, and you can go ahead and you can change your reality.
Okay, I just want to touch bases on saying, me, myself, again, the reason I consider myself a youth, because I still am, I'm only 24 years old, never been arrested, don't have a background. I mentor my own peers. I work at the Kelly Hall YMCA on Chicago Avenue in Hamlin. And what's going on outside in our community, I just so happen to be, blessed to be able to go through it at a faster pace and break up out of it at a quicker pace. I was able to leave myself outside of what's going on in our society right now. To be more closer, we're in the midst of an unjustified war right now. They're closing down our schools. What we need to do is reopen our schools and teach what we know instead of his history. We need to start teaching our history. We need to start telling our stories instead of his story. Back on speaking on genocide, because I wrote these notes down. I wasn't intending on knowing what this meeting was based on today, but it's based on just what I expected and hoped that it would be based on. Genocide, to delete or annihilate, self-destruct, extinct, a nation or ethnic group in a whole. And that's what they're in the process of doing for us. And the way they're doing it is, like I spoke on earlier, subliminal. They tricked us to have thoughts of something that really to have thoughts about things that it really doesn't mean. They're fabricating us and redesignating us with secretive means behind its purpose. They've misled and misunderstood us and making us mislead and be misunderstood. They're programming us to believe some things that have other meanings or mean unholy meanings. One thing I want to say, what we have to do to make one of these changes being a youth, and one thing I know that helped me change and something I think that'll get out to my peers, we have to be more intellectually motivated, positive support for the upcoming future right now. We have to take this meeting outside of this room, first off, and we have to take it outside where they at, where the violence is. I've witnessed some of the most powerful messages being pushed outside where the people are. We have to, this meeting is being held secretive to me. No disrespect to whoever organized it, but we should be outside on the loud horns, on the loud speakers, right there on that court where them gangbangers at, where this young man got killed there last night, preaching this message. The only way we're gonna touch these people, it's not gonna be in 1 day process, 1 week process, or 1 month process, or a 1 year process. We're going to have to continue to force it every day. Like he said, speaking, I don't know y'all name, and I apologize, and I'm going to get more in tune with all of you brothers as soon as we finish this. One thing we have to do, like he said, is we have to show a better reflex on what we're doing. We were able to show the kids that we was able to be superstars in basketball. So what they did, they took balls, and they forced themselves to learn them skills, and they practiced them skills every day, which made them unique to it every day. So we have to take these skills We have to force them on them. We have to force it on them. The stuff we learned in school, it was forced on us. It was programmed into us. The things that we doing now, we have to program and force it into our people. We have to make them want to learn this stuff. We have to make them want to know this stuff. We can't give up on them. That's what we can't do, because they have already given up on themselves. So what
We're dealing with a broad range of many problems with our young, and I'm going to concern myself with black people, because that's where I need to concern myself, because that's something that I can actually relate to, and what's actually going on the ground. So I can't talk about other races right now, but there's a huge black problem, as we all know, that, like as we said, it's not going to be a one-two punch. It's all systemic. It's been by design. We know that incarceration is a $1 trillion business. So now so you guys already talked enough about the symptoms. So I want to talk about some solutions very quickly, and I want to be able to get each of you a number, because I'm doing some things that I'm doing on the ground already that I'm trying to make happen, and we need a coalition of networks like you guys. That's the reason why I'm here, because I need to know somebody like Lupe. I talk to his mom every now and then, and the problem is with people like Lupe and all those guys, they need to know musicians like me. First of all, the reason, because historically it's going to be significant. The second thing is that before it was them, it was me. Before it was me, it was them. And so traditionally, we need to pass on this. There's a lot that we can pass on through the music, because we know that the arts has been taken. The arts is we know that the arts is out of our schools now. So among a lot of other things that you guys have already talked about, and so we know that the arts is going to be a good component. Law enforcement, everybody that's up here, educators, attorneys, we're going to need a broad range of all of us, real men, to get back and address and help the next this generation, so that we can have a much more productive society that we're looking at. And so, having said that, I want to make sure that I get to know each and every, as you said, and that's why I'm here, because I'm trying to network, because I only have so much time on the planet. I don't know how old you guys are. I'm 55, you know, but I hope that God gives me 100 and some years, right? But I want to do my due diligence to give back to our society through the art form of music. That is one arm that I'm going to deal with, because I know that music and media, we got to change the media. We have to use media. I want to be able to teach. I have a program called Down with Guns, Up with Instruments. And what that is that I want to be able to use the instruments as one tool among many tools that you guys can actually give to our young people to help, because with instruments, we need to get people to get back to the organic side of music as well as the technology. And so they can work hand in hand so we can do music. I want to teach our young people, gangbangers, whoever they are, and teach them about music, to learn the instruments, to give them a whole different aspect, a whole different perspective, that they can use their own experiences with music, instruments, to film. And then so we can change whatever we need to do through film now, because we have the power of film. We don't have to wait for media anymore to tell us what's happening out here on the ground. We can actually tell the story now, our story, which has been many years of history. And so, like I said, we need to keep the historical aspects of what's going to educate our people, as well as the spiritual, because there's so much that our young people need to know from us, but there's not enough black men, in my view, that are representing our young people. I mean, but I don't want to generalize that, but now we're back to grassroots again. The game's never changed. So I feel like we have to get back and back in the street as real men, whether we're Muslims or Christians or whatever we are, to do something to make a significant impact. Yeah. So I just wanted to say that real quick, and thank you. My name is Charlie Hodge, better known as Chuck Love. They call me the Windy City bass legend, and there's a reason for that. So. All right. Huh? Oh, really?
Thanks a lot, brother. Okay. Yeah, I wanted to commend the panel as well. Some very important topics were addressed, and we definitely need to address the youth in our community, with particularly the education and avenues for them to be productive and to have value. You mentioned the boarding schools. I have a nephew in boarding school right now down in Georgia. And I myself, my history's been my background's in media and technology. So I've been fortunate enough to be in environments and communities that I probably would never have had access to without the education I got. And the one thing that I did notice that you mentioned was the power of networking. I've been on jobs where I knew if it wasn't for my education, I wouldn't be there. But at the same time, people of other races were there with me because their uncle owned the company. You know.
I think, the brother asked the question here, and I look out here and see James. How many people know who James Dean is? If y'all on the west side, y'all know who he is, but I was just telling Brother Lance, and I have to look at this because you asked a question about what are some of the things that we can do. It just dawned on me, James, it was 1981 or 82 in this building that I met you. And you were organizer on the west side, and I just come to Chicago. And I consider myself an elder. I'm 65 years old. And I know that you are in my group. But I just want to say to the young folk here, part of the challenge that we have to do is for people like James Dean and myself, it's not to lead, it's to teach. It's to pass on what God has blessed us to learn. And so I'm proud to see you, and I hope there will be other young people 40 years from now who will look back and say, man, that guy was so-and-so was there, because it's the elders and it's those of us, and you've stayed on the struggle, through ups and downs all these years, and I'm proud to say that it's good to see you 40 years, 30 years later, same place, same time.
As we close out, I want to say one of the things we got to do is stop lying. We got these people in here talking about they 50 and 60, don't look a day over 40. These brothers in here look good, and that's how we can look once we come back to ourselves. Before we turn it over to Minister Michael and have him close us out, I just want to make a comment of something that I saw recently, and this is in keeping with the comments that I've heard on the panel in terms of how we are really under assault from an angle that we just don't perceive. My daughter pulled up a website. She was buying some gym shoes. She done got a little job now, making a little money. And she was shopping for shoes. And she went on this website to buy her a pair of gym shoes. And she said, Daddy, look at this. They have a gym shoe that is like a Michael Jordan high top, but it has a shackle on it. It has an actual shackle on the shoe. And that was the first time I had actually seen that. And I'm thinking, my God, you talk about perpetuating violence on a community. Can any one of you sit down and imagine yourself in a room designing a shoe with the shackle on it? Now, you're the designer. Can you imagine yourself designing a shoe with a shackle on it that you want some young person to wear, right? Now, this is planting a seed in their mind that perpetuates them as a slave and as a convict, as an inmate. This is actual warfare. This is violence that's being perpetuated on us. Yes, sir. Yes, ma'am. Yeah. So some things are not surprising given their history, but it still has a shock value when you see it, because just when you thought you've seen it all, then they come with something else. It's all in the same. So I want to thank you for your attendance and for your coming out. I want to thank the panelists too. Give yourselves a round of applause. Let me have Brother Minister Michael come up.
Thank you, Brother Johnny. Okay, everybody all right? Okay, I'm just going to close out very briefly. For those of you who don't know me, I am Minister Michael Muhammad. I'm one of the co-founders of the Street Peace Coalition. And very briefly, I think we all gave you a brochure to give you some background on our group. We started in roughly about September of last year with a group of young men that are part of our ministry, Torchlight Interfaith Ministries, talking about this issue of violence. That conversation among those members of our ministry grew into the need to expand the conversation. And so from that, we started opening the doors of our location and bringing in brothers from different parts of the city who we knew had some history or connection to what we call the streets. And so we would have anywhere from 10 to 30 men gathering with us every week faithfully for months and just having these ad hoc discussions about this issue of violence and how we might constitute ourselves to have some positive impact on the violence. And so out of that, the group called for more structure and so forth. And so that call for structure led to what we call the Street Peace Coalition. And so we put a structure in place, we put an agenda in place, we put a code of conduct in place, we put a lot of things in place in terms of structure, because Professor Lance has always talked about structural violence. And so one of the things that keyed me in on is to understand that you cannot fight structural violence without structure. And so one of the ways we make mistakes in the community is that we undervalue our structures. And so I'm keenly interested in being involved with structure of some type, because we have to leave institutions behind that our sons and our daughters can fight with. Without a structure, you don't have a tool to fight. Okay, the mind is a structure, the spirit is a structure, your body is a structure, and everything that evolves out of human life and existence without structure, you are defenseless. And so the Street Peace Coalition is a structure. And so some of our steering committees have come in and out of the door today. They had to keep it moving. We had a lot of our steering committee members that are out of town. But on the inside, you'll see the individuals who constitute our formal steering committee that acts like a board to govern our direction and so forth. You see the individuals who we have asked to sit on our spiritual advisory committee because we believe that God has to be first in our endeavors. And so we constituted a spiritual advisory committee with 2 or 3 esteemed religious leaders, one who was supposed to be here today, but I guess his schedule did not permit him to be here. And then we also have asked 2 of our panelists to serve as our ad hoc legal advisory committee, because we know that as black men, we just innately have legal issues, and we need to be able to call somebody of a legal mind on the phone before we do certain things and say, hey, should we do it like this, or is there another way we need to do this to protect ourselves? So I am an organizer. I'm a minister. My work, from my perspective, is a spiritual work, but I'm an organizer. I'm a student of the Honorable Minister Louis Farrakhan. I met him in 1980 or 81, and I've been under his tutelage directly and indirectly since that time. And I'm the pastor of what's called Torchlight Interfaith Ministries, and I try to help bring our brothers and our sisters together. So out of that, my life's work have come across the path of all of our panelists except this young brother who I'm just meeting today, and I'm happy to have him. Well, let me start here with Brother Bart. is a brother I met with another group that I organized called the New Black Leadership Coalition. And we organized activists and organizers of individuals who were pro-black and believed in black people doing for self. And they were attempting to create other organizations in the community. We created a round table for them to come in and try to move on one agenda. And Attorney Bills was a part of that group. He's a part of that group.